Hello and welcome to Faith Talks. In today's program, we'll be asking, can you doubt and still have faith? Joining me in the studio today is John Gendel and Sunisha Howard. Both of you are pastors and both of you had a journey into becoming Christians. But before we hear more about that, let's just ask ourselves, what is doubt? Sunisha.
Well, I did check a dictionary this morning, and what I read there, it says it's that doubt is a feeling of uncertainty and a sense of lack of conviction. Of course, there is much more to it as well, because this term doubt is connected to other terms like when we talk about challenges, when we talk about the questioning, when we talk about the lack of knowledge. All this has this tinge of doubt attached to it. So that's what I think doubt is.
But John, shouldn't we be full of faith and not full of doubt as Christians?
Well, to some extent you can be both, because your doubt can lead you then to question things which you should not doubt at all. And it can also lead you to doubt things which you should doubt. Doubt can take you in two directions, either a bad direction or a good direction. And it could be that you've been misled in some of your understanding, and so your doubt is the doorway to the truth. So doubt can be a great thing at times.
So you are actually arguing that on some level, doubt does belong to faith.
It is part of it, yes. We're finite human beings. Only God can see all things. And so for his understanding of the world to be open to us, we must actually then walk a pathway of which doubt is a part.
Somebody said that the doubt is like ants in the trousers. They keep you moving. They keep faith moving, and I think that has some truth in it as well.
So both of you are working as ministers in your local congregations, but both of you have a bit of a journey about doubting where you were at some stage in your life. John, why don't you share with me a little bit about your journey?
Okay, thank you. Well, I was, as a child, I went to church, but I was raised essentially as a teenager, and as an adult I continued without going to church, without having church or Christianity as any part of my life whatsoever. And in fact, I worked for the armaments industry. So you could say, instead of saving people as I'm trying to do now, then I was part of the killing people business. So I was as far removed as possible from the direction I should be going in. I don't believe that I had a particular worldview. It's just that God was not part of my life. I think I believed in the existence of God, but I wasn't aware that God required anything of me. But because I was the type who seemed to have broad interests and seemed to question things, then one day when somebody mentioned to me something about going to church in the middle of the week, I thought, that's really strange, and I started asking questions about that, because I thought going to church at the weekend is bad enough, but going in the middle of the week is strange. And that was a start. That was a start of my turnaround, that first question, why is that?
So you actually started your Christian journey with a question. Questioning the existence of where you were and where you were spiritually, even though you might not have used the word spiritually at that point.
And also why other people were different from me. Because I was working in a sort of closed environment where everybody was working towards the same end. It was almost like a small town, the company I worked for, you see. And this was something from outside of my experience and outside of my worldview coming into it. So that was very important.
But doubt, asking questions has a bad name, doesn't it? I mean, when we look at the Apostle Thomas, we call him Doubting Thomas, and that's not a compliment. Why do we have a problem with doubting, asking questions?
Well, first you mentioned Thomas. I think that when we read this text, Jesus doesn't make a moral judgment. He just states the fact, and he said it would have been better after walking so many years with me that you did it better than that. But it's not something that Jesus says, well, doubt is, that's the wrong thing. I think the problem that the church setting has is that often the Christian churches are in a propaganda business. So they try to, you don't go and advertise your detergent and says, well, our detergent is probably the best one, but we cannot be for sure, and stuff like that. So you have to sell it. And I think the church as an institution often all of the Christian churches have this attitude, which makes it very uncomfortable for them to deal. And it's easier to have a, an unquestioning congregation sometimes. So that can be part of the reason.
That goes a little bit with what author Philip Janssens talk about when he says that doubt is something almost every person experiences at some point, yet something that the church does not always handle well.
Absolutely.
But how can that we move from that? If it's something in our spiritual journey that everybody's experiencing at some point in their life, why can the church not handle it better?
I think it's perhaps something we have to learn for ourselves, really. I think having the right kind of leadership in the church, where the leadership, perhaps in a small group context or perhaps through preaching, the leadership can show that, not necessarily they have doubts, but that we shouldn't take some textual understandings at face value without saying, well, exactly what does this mean for this particular context and this particular situation?
I think there are basically two types of religious people in any religion. There is one group that is seeking security. They just want to build a nice castle or a cage and feel comfortable in it. Once it's done and sorted and organized, furnished, you don't want too much to be rattled. But then there is another group of people who see religion as a eye-opening experience. It gives them freedom. Suddenly the new country opens, and you explore, you question, you come to everything, and I think these two types of people live together in a religion. We find it easier, probably, that first group, who kind of just be a cozy and don't ask too many questions. But I think that really, when Jesus is talking about, he invites people to kind of look and explore and find for themselves what the kingdom of heaven is like, And I think this is where we should really be. And the doubt in that context, questioning in that context, is actually quite welcome in many sense.
Yes, I think you're right when you say that the way Jesus left it with people, because he didn't answer all the questions.
Yes.
He didn't run after people who were walking away from him and say, look, you obviously don't believe in me. What else can I make clear to you?
And you mentioned one of the pivotal moments in my, this is after I became a Christian. I was studying at theology, and I come from a communist background. So everybody knows everything there, including pastors. And it bothered me a little bit because pastors felt obliged to know everything. And they would give you the answer, and it was a bit kind of, but they felt they must give an answer. And I always remember at the college, Dr. Matak, it was my professor, and one day we asked him a question that was about Jesus, something I can't remember, but it was one of the most. I had an epiphany when he said to all of us, "Well, I don't know." To me, it was such a liberating thing, and Jesus leaves us with it. He said, "Okay, you'll find out. You're maybe not ready." Peter didn't get anything. Way after Jesus went to heaven, Peter got things right, but Jesus allowed him to go through this journey. And I think this is where we should take the inspiration as well.
But if you are actually suggesting, Sinisha, that doubt is part of your spiritual journey.
Yes. It all depends. Doubt is not a problem itself, but it is the spirit you approach it. Is it a negative or a positive one? You can be negativistic and then put down everything. Everything that you do is, you just try to deconstruct. But the positive approach, you ask yourself, did I do the best? Can I do better? What if I did this? How would that end up? From that positive experience, positive spirit, doubt is actually very constructive, creative, and productive in your faith.
I think this idea of deconstructing everything is really skepticism, which leads nowhere.
Absolutely.
But when we talk about doubt, we need to be clear, I think, what we're doubting. It's one thing to doubt a particular understanding. It's one thing to doubt one's relationship to God. But to doubt that God exists is something else entirely different for the Christian.
Yeah, and maybe you have started something here wonderful to explain. Sometimes even the title Faith and Doubt is not really a proper title, because faith is something innate almost in us. Faith is something that we have it whether you want it or not. You can suppress it, but faith is different from belief. And when we talk about doubt and faith, it's more likely that we would talk about doubt and belief, because beliefs are the ones that we question and everything. But faith is in a different realm. I had a discussion with my atheist friend the other day, and we talked about the faith. And he suggested to me that I'm believing because I'm scared of dying and stuff like that, But then I said to him, you know me now for 2 years, we are drinking coffee together, and after this, and you know now that when I say to you that I cannot help myself but have that faith in that God that you talk about. It's just something that I cannot do, anything about it. That's not in question, that sense that there is something bigger than yourself. But the questions of do we do it the right way? Should we emphasize this or that? Did I get it right? It's always going to be present in our spiritual or faith journey.
But I hear what you're saying. I want to pick up a little bit where you were, John, where you're talking about it's not about being skeptical. Do you see a differentiating between doubting and being skeptical?
I see being skeptical as being closed, really, in that one has already made up one's mind and is determined not to receive anything new. And so everything is met with the same negative response. Whereas when you doubt, you're open to receive some things, such as the truth, with a positive response and say, oh, I never heard of that before, or I never heard it put quite that way before. Or you can say, do you mean I can do this and that's not a problem, etc. So you're open with doubt. With skepticism, no, that's it.
I would connect skepticism to mistrust.
Yes.
Rather than and the doubt more with the curiosity. I think that would be associated with, in my case at least.
But you're talking about belief and faith. Are they not the same? But you're talking about them in two different aspects.
Of course they're not the same. Belief is in the realm of opinions. Beliefs you change. Today you think one day and some new light comes and you think differently. But faith is innate. Faith is, you can tell anything about my father, my earthly father. You can tell how, he did not do well for me, but I cannot help myself. He is my father, and no argument will change this. But opinion, you change it. You change it all the time. And as I said once, what I love about our church, that we don't have dogmas. We often forget about that. We have beliefs. We believe that this is to be true in the context, in the time, in the circumstances that I live in. But tomorrow, I don't know, maybe I'll have to give another meaning to what I believe now. But faith is gift to everyone. Even the atheists, they have it, but they just kind of don't know in many ways, because when I speak to them, I ask them, do you believe in justice? Do you believe in treating people equally? Yes. Where does it come from? This is what my God represents. This is what my God stands for. How did you get that? This is the faith, and we just help them to discover that faith.
So you're actually saying that faith is something we're kind of almost born with. How we express it might vary.
I think Bible says that the faith is a gift from God. You didn't acquire it. It's given to you.
So when we come across doubt and questioning, if we can say that doubt is questioning the larger pictures, the dogmas, the existence of God and all of that, is that not a sign of weakness when we have doubt of that existentialistic nature?
I think there is an issue here, though. We want to distinguish faith in something which is true from faith in something which is untrue. And faith in God, when that's expressed, that does open the door for us to see something we never saw before. I think it's Tertullian who said that faith is believing that which we do not see, and the reward of faith is to see that which we believe. When you're born again, your faith opens a door of spiritual sight. And so many things which you previously doubted, so many things which you previously could not understand, despite the time you spent trying to wrap your brain around it, so many of these things then become clear and fall into place, because that's the way that the process works with God and with true faith.
I think we all have a moments of doubts, all the time almost. And I think the answer that you were asking for, it takes courage to admit that. It takes courage to face up to it, because we often are capable of pretending to lead some holy spiritual lives. and yet we are eaten from inside, but we often don't feel able to express, and we suppress it, we deny it. But it takes courage. And people who face their doubts are courageous people.
And that, you know, that leads well into the whole thing that, you know, faith is something that is not, we cannot take for certain. And as you talked about before, there's a lot of people in religious circumstances who need things to be very certain, and doubting things actually questions that certainty. So doubt is the opposite of certainty in specific areas.
I think it's worth mentioning that when I came to church, I did not become a Christian on a basis of evidence. That would be matter of beliefs. It was not the evidence, but I saw this Christian person there. And I saw that that person lives on some different plane of existence. And this is what drew me, not because he had an arguments, not because he knew something, could lay before me and I could, what can I say? I went, and this is, you need evidence to some extent, but eventually we all are making a leap of faith, regardless of what kind of doubt you have. But I think that's what defines that attitude towards faith that I would like to say.
So we're actually saying on the flip side of isn't there a danger then in not facing our doubts?
I think the Bible does tell us that when we go through trials, then those trials help develop perseverance, and that if it works out can lead to maturity. So to not face our doubts would be to possibly then not reach the maturity which we could reach, not become the Christian that God wants us to become, not become the man or woman of faith needed for a particular time and place. If we don't face our doubts, then we'd always be in a situation where we might be rocked at any time by anything else that comes along.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about doubt is, as I said, integral part of us. What our work should be is to make it important that we create an environment where these feelings of doubt can be expressed. And this is where the church comes, and this is where the community comes. It's very dangerous probably to have your own doubts living on your own and going, but it's important. This is why Jesus emphasizes community, ecclesia, gathering, where we can share. And I may have a certain doubt today which he doesn't have, and he may help me to make the journey through rather than to be left alone and just kind of let this doubt fester in my mind. And I think the community is a key. The right setting helps this doubt to be channeled and then turn into something wonderful eventually.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. Although I came from a scientific background, it wasn't just a case of getting all my questions answered. In fact, until you're born again, you can't understand the answers, as I've indicated. But when I started turning up at some of these church meetings, I saw people who seemed to be so happy. They seemed to have something I didn't have. And there were ordinary people. I remember seeing a couple of brothers coming in the evenings, covered in brick dust and cement and etc., straight from work. And I was thinking, I thought you're supposed to wear your suit, etc., at church. So this is going back deep into my memory. And that just caused me to question. They were wonderful people who offered me tapes and books. They invited me to their homes for a meal, and this totally threw me.
And there is sometimes danger that we in the church can we kind of show the canvas to the newcomers, almost like a Disneyland. Everything's perfect there. Everything is nice, and people come and then they get disappointed. You mentioned the people. I remember about 2 or 3 weeks before my baptism, I suddenly realized I have doubts, about certain doctrines, and it bothered me so much that I left my class and ran to the church. I remember running to the church during the break. Wow. And I knocked on the pastor's door, and he opened the door and he said, "What?" And then I realized I cannot tell him that. I just felt that I could not speak about my doubts to him. So I left it there. But the next Sabbath in the church, there was one of those nice ladies. She was not a theologian or anything like that, but she was one of those calm, wonderful, most beautiful Christians that you can imagine. And then I asked her, you know, can I ask you a question, stuff like that. And then she said, yeah, sure. And I said, do you sometimes experience doubt? And you know, she said just like that, oh, all the time, she said. And that was a source of such a comfort to me, that she was able to say that. And I could see that this person who lives such an exemplary life, she struggles obviously, and yet she remains a wonderful, beautiful Christian. To me, that was it. That was the day when I said, well, I'm ready. Even with all my kind of questions that I still had in my mind, which I still carry today with some of them.
But isn't it interesting that you felt you couldn't go and speak to your pastor about your doubts? Isn't it interesting that you were worried about expressing those doubts? So there must be something in our faith communities that doesn't allow for an openness of discussions. Yeah. You've talked about it beautifully, we come together and it's ecclesia and we can share our doubts and support each other. But is that really happening?
I think it depends what kind of group we're a member of, really. There's so many varied churches. And some churches, they might surprise us by harbouring just the one or two people we need, even though we think they seem to be so closed and quiet. Because that is the nature of God. He places people in our life that we need. And if we need to meet up with somebody to help with our doubts, we'll find them.
Yes. And they are, you know, we are keen to embrace stereotypes, and the churches can be like that. And indeed, there are many churches where, well, you just can't. But you always get surprised, you know, with someone there who just, you know, I keep saying to my secular friends, you know, who come to church, I said, in my church, you know, the beauty of it is you can find next to you a most wonderful, open-minded, progressive person in the world. But also next to you can find the fantastical, you know, a fanatic in the same place. And you know, there is a beauty in it as well. You know, where else you can find anything like that, you know? And I think we should, you know, not just, we understand stereotypes, but there is more to it in each community. That I think they're wonderful people who are happy to shepherd you and who themselves go. And that there is that sincerity, that when once you find that, then you can talk and openly. You know.
But if doubt is kind of like an opening to a spiritual growth, why is it that we don't encourage doubting more in church? I have never heard a pastor standing up giving a sermon encouraging the members to doubt.
Again, I would say it depends what we're doubting. So don't doubt the existence of God, because he's the one who gives us wisdom when we ask. But as I say, to doubt a particular understanding should be encouraged, because that flexes our spiritual muscles more than anything. That grows us more than anything. Just the other night at a small group meeting, I jokingly said, "Oh, that's something to cross out of my Bible then," because I didn't believe in a particular understanding that was there in this text, in this participant's guide. So yeah, time to actually flex our muscles and say, well, how do you understand it? And we grow because of that. We have to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the churches are not perfect, and there is always something. As I said, we sometimes get things slightly wrong. Every Christian denomination does that. Sometimes we, as I said at the beginning, you know, we're in business of propaganda. You know, it turns out to be, as you grow, you start thinking about these organizations, about the rules, about the constitutions, about beliefs. But if you think about people, if your prime objective is the people and their salvation, then there is room for everything, even for the doubt, to be treated and dealt with in a kind, loving, Jesus-like way.
But then, you know, looking at it, how can we then as Christians, if we believe that doubting and asking questions is part of our growth and it's important for our faith development, how can we encourage people to open themselves up to asking more questions and not simply have the answer, it's in the Bible, that's it, just believe it and be quiet?
And that's the key priority, the building that loving relationship. That this person wishes happiness for me and cares for me. And I think this is it. Once we have created an environment, a loving, genuinely loving environment, then people become open. I would tell my friends a lot of things. In front of the camera, I won't tell a lot of things because I don't know who's behind that camera. But this is the key. When you have a loving environment, all things suddenly become possible. And I think that was Jesus did. Jesus was with these few people there who barely could, well, they couldn't even read or write. But spending time with them, they're realizing that he's there for them, suddenly made them different people.
Yeah. I think we have to foster the right atmosphere all the time and continually ask questions such as why ourselves. How did that come to happen? Did he mean to do that? There are so many Bible stories, particularly in the Old Testament, I find, of people who made a real mess of their lives, despite the fact that you seem to hear from God on a one-to-one basis. And you can look at those stories and say, why did that happen? Where's the humanity in this? And where's the humanity in it for ourselves in our day and age? And once you actually look at these people in the Bible as real people, then you can see it applies to me as a real person, not as a caricature who has to look a particular way.
And that is the beauty of having such a rich scripture of the Bible, that you can find people who doubt. You do find, the story of Job who questions God, questions his situation in life. You find it throughout the Bible where questions are being thrown back at God. Why, oh God, why have you forsaken me? It's probably a very classical one. But I want to thank both of you for being in the studio today and actually sharing some thoughts regarding doubt and faith and is it possible, or you have actually told us that it is possible to live in that borderland where faith and doubt intertwine and where they actually feed each other and they are part of the same picture. And why not add your voice to the debate by joining us on our Facebook group or email us your thoughts on today's program. Frederick Buechner expresses his ambivalence about doubt beautifully. Whether your faith is that there is a God or that there is not a God, if you don't have any doubts, you are either kidding yourself or asleep. Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.